Hello and welcome to another episode of Driven by Doing. Today we have Lindsay Tabas joining us from Philadelphia here in the US. Lindsay, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So Lindsay is a product market expert. She helps a lot of entrepreneurs to find product market fit. And she does a lot of workshops for a lot of entrepreneurs across the United States. So today we are going to learn about Lindsay's story. And she has started as a software engineer and then moved into UX research and then become an entrepreneur. So Lindsay, tell us a little bit more about your background, how you were able to become an entrepreneur and what's the motivating thing that helped you along the way.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you for having me. Yes, I was raised by two self-employed parents who were raised by four self-employed parents. So I would say it's kind of in my blood to want to be self-employed and be an entrepreneur. I always knew that was on my path and my road of life. So to give you some background, though, I started designing software in 2002 while I was studying systems engineering at the University of Virginia. It was kind of love at first sight. I glommed onto this idea of designing technology for people. And I went to Silicon Valley in 2005 to kind of pursue my startup dreams. There, I got a 2-year master's at UC Berkeley and started working mostly in enterprise software, consulting for consulting companies, for health tech, managing doctors' offices kind of software. But on the side, I was always working on startups. I kind of look back at that time in my life as throwing myself at the proverbial wall. If you know the American Ninja Warrior, there's that ramp that they have to run up and then they grab the edge and climb up, and you see the person like run several times and like sometimes never make it. That's when I look at myself in my 20s. I was doing a lot of that, hacking away on the weekends, participating in pitch competitions and hackathons and looking for tech co-founders. I did all the things that we say are part of the startup blueprint and the road to success, but I didn't really find that success. And knowing in my heart of hearts that I was an entrepreneur and meant to be an entrepreneur, I felt really bad about myself that I wasn't able to make it happen. So when I left Silicon Valley in 2010, kind of had my tail between my legs, feeling like maybe I'm not cut out for this world. Maybe it's not meant to be. I need to figure something else out. But I just couldn't get away from this idea of I want to design technology for people. I want to be involved in that's what my calling is. So after backpacking around the world for 6 months, trying to explore what else I could be doing with my life, I just kind of returned back to designing software. And I was in New York City working for startups there. At that point in 2012, user experience started to actually become a thing startups were hiring for. So back in 2007, 2008, companies like Facebook weren't hiring designers unless you also were a software developer. So they didn't appreciate the skill set I had, that I could go from what customers say to what engineers build, and I could have a conversation about relational databases and object-oriented programming with developers and talk in their language, but I could also be extremely empathetic and understand customers and what was going on in their lives. So I kept pursuing my career. It became a little easier because UX became more of a thing. And in 2014 was my first year being fully self-employed. I started an e-commerce business. I ended up contracting and consulting as a way to fund that business. I realized that business was not making me money, but my tech consulting skills were. So I decided to focus on that. in 2015. And now I can say I've been self-employed for 7.5 years.
Wow, that's just amazing. Just to hear from an entrepreneur who is super passionate about what you're doing. And just walking through that journey, it is so evident that you are born as an entrepreneur. Like you never gave up that attitude of, hey, like I wanted to become self-employed, just like my parents did. And even being in Silicon Valley, yes, you did a lot of things and like trying to be that person that you wanted to see. But eventually you found that way or path just from the problems that you faced yourself and kind of eventually saw that coming. And now you're helping a lot of entrepreneurs, hundreds of entrepreneurs. How does that feel, Lindsay, like when you're working with entrepreneurs and helping them? Because that's exactly the journey that you kind of like walk through. So tell us a little bit more about like on a daily basis, since you're working with a lot of entrepreneurs, what are some of the challenges that you see across the board that a lot of early stage entrepreneurs, especially first time entrepreneurs, face?
Yeah. So I just want to point out something that you mentioned, and it's kind of the persistence and resilience that I demonstrated over my career. Sometimes it was obsessive, right? Like running at the ramp over and over again, and it just not being the right time to be an entrepreneur. But in order for us to thrive as human beings, we have to develop the capacity to be resilient. And if we don't have that capacity, we won't thrive. Now that brings me to my next point, which is I am thriving right now because I've been able to build something over the past 7.5 years where I get to do what really interests me and what I really love, helping other entrepreneurs build their businesses. But what's key to what I'm doing versus other business coaches out there is that I'm demystifying the work that goes into working with software developers. Okay, so there are a lot of non-technical founders out there who have never worked with software developers. You no longer have to be technical to understand how technology solves a problem. So these people are coming in and they don't know that 55% of IT projects across companies of all sizes fail, that the average scope creep on any software development project is 3x the original scope. So they're going in thinking they're going to spend 5,000, they spend 15,000. They think they're going to spend 10, they spend 30. They think they're going to spend 50, they spend 150. Right? And they don't know that actually that chasm between what customers say and what engineers build, the skill set to cross that chasm is not all code, right? Everyone thinks I need to learn how to code to get to this software development piece. There's all these other skills that go into like business analysis, right? Product management, design, research, detailing software requirements, writing use cases. There are all of these skills, and you don't need to know how to code, right? So that's where I help my entrepreneurs is build their skill set for the long term so they can minimize that scope creep. They can minimize that confusion, right? But best of all is that I really am helping them understand what kind of product will be successful before they start putting money into software development.
That's just awesome, Lindsay. I mean, you talked about helping entrepreneurs, like who are not even technical founders, because that's a common myth across the board, right? You have to be technical in order to create products. Yes, that's true, but you don't have to be a technical co-founder. You can always outsource the projects, but you actually talked about the common problem across the board. Being you have the small budgets as an early stage entrepreneur, you don't have lots of money, and you have to solve a problem that customer has.
Right. And so what I've seen over my career is that this startup blueprint that starts with just build a great product, that might work for a technologist that can code, But to be honest, it doesn't actually really work for anyone, because even a coder who builds something, their starting point might have been wrong, right? That there should be some research up front before you even start. But a coder, the risk or financial risk is not so big when you say just build a great product. But when you tell that to a non-technical founder, that means they have to invest money. And the definition of a minimal viable product is the smallest amount of features done in the cheapest way possible. So it's kind of an oxymoron for a non-technical founder to hire a software development shop to build an MVP. Because even spending $1,000 is not necessarily the cheapest way to demonstrate your value proposition, right?
Absolutely right, Lindsay, because a lot of, I mean, like student entrepreneurs, for example, like, they come out of school, like, they have these wonderful ideas and they want to create that MVP or the first prototype. They always think about, hey, like, let me, like, bring somebody who can help me build this. But eventually, in order to even somebody pay for your product, it has to solve a problem, right? In order to find or identify that problem, you have to do customer discovery. Now, help us walk through, like, since you work with a lot of entrepreneurs, what is the process or the approach that you teach in your programs in order to identify those key pain points that people are trying to solve?
Right. So the thing I like to start with that I don't say in my workshops, but is important for people that are outside of the technology industry to understand. I think you can tell I'm alluding to there's a lot of bad advice out there, right? There's a lot of bad advice out there. One of the things is that I found really, really interesting is that a thought leader in the product management space who talks about product management for other product managers in the corporate world, professional product managers. He did a research survey in 2018, and he asked, what are your top major product management problems? What are your biggest challenges as a product manager? Product managers, their number one challenge was customer research. Professional product managers don't know who to talk to, what to ask, and which insights to act on. Okay? So how are you, as like a non-technical founder or a student or someone that is early on in your career, doesn't have an experience, supposed to know how to do these things, right? Now I've been told I ask really great questions, which is a funny compliment. But in labs, this is basically, we start with, let's create some hypotheses around who we think our early adopter, early evangelist is going to be. There's a very specific definition of an early evangelist, but most importantly, they need to have a problem and they need to be looking for a solution. It's too expensive to convince people that they have a problem and convince them that they need a solution. So we want to find people that have a problem and need a solution. So that's who to talk to. And then what to ask is, I think what many people do wrong with interviews is they talk too much. So the average entrepreneur will say, yeah, I talked to a handful of people. If I asked, what percentage of time did you talk and the customer talk? The entrepreneur's like, maybe 60-40. I'm like, cool, that was not research. It needs to be like 90% customer, 10% you. You need to be like, I call it a user therapist. Ask for stories, ask for examples, ask for numbers and hard stats, ask for feelings. Don't say, what do you think of this? Because again, what you think of this could be a bad starting point. So to uncover those needs and uncover the problem that is most important to them, you have to ask for stories. And then the key is that you have to ask the same questions of more than 3 to 5 people that all fit the same profile in order to glean insights. So the next mistake everyone makes is that they have one conversation and then they change their interview script for the next conversation and they keep changing it. And you need at least 3 people to answer the same question to identify a theme that's worth acting on. And so I'll give everyone this rule. It's the rule of 3. If one person says it, it's an opinion. If two people say it, it's a coincidence that they both said the same thing. If three people say it, then it's a theme that you should act on. Okay? So you need to ask the same exact questions of the same type of customer profile at least 3 times before you pivot or change your idea or your approach. And that's a problem that's an additional problem that most people make, is that they hear 1 or 2 people that don't confirm their hypotheses and they pivot too soon. It's just that they didn't stay with the problem and stay with the understanding people long enough.
That's great, Lindsay, because these are some of the common mistakes that you have seen again and again, early stage entrepreneurs do, right? So now that, like, let's say people come up with these questions, right? How can people come up with these questions that they wanted to ask in the customer discovery? Do you think like it's more about the product, or is it just the general questions? You mentioned about asking about the stories. What are the common generic ways that they can formulate these questions to get the best information that they could in their research?
Yeah, so let's back up and think about this. Imagine a day where you have an amazing product to put out there, okay? There has to be some situation, imagine it as like a comic strip. There has to be some situation in which your customer experiences a problem, has a thought, looks for a solution, and finds you, okay? So you need to know what they're experiencing when they have this thought or problem. You need to know where they go and who they turn to for help. You need to understand what their buying decisions are. Like, how do they evaluate what makes a good solution? And then you have to convince them to buy you. Okay? That's a lot of stuff before they even see your product. So you shouldn't even ask about the product, because you need to understand, tell me a story. And I have some videos on my YouTube channel. So I hope you include a link to my YouTube channel so people see these videos, because I put out a lot of free content. Tell me about a story. Tell me about a time, the last time you experienced X. Okay, so maybe tell me about a time you were really unhappy with your hairstylist. Start off the day. Tell me about the session. What did you guys talk about? When did you get upset? How did that make you feel? What did you do next? Did you find something to help solve your problem? If you did, what was it? Why did you like it? If you didn't, why weren't any of the solutions good enough? Like, you need all of those answers first. And you need to know what they look for to solve a problem, right? So an example that I love is that Greg Uter is an entrepreneur I worked with in 2018. He has a bulb, a company called Bedtime Bulb. It's a light bulb that cancels out blue light emission. So it creates a very warm environment in your bedroom to go to sleep to. There's a lot of people with sleep problems, okay? We have like the quantified self community that wants to measure their sleep and will try all different products and blackout curtains to sleep well. We thought another segment was new moms, right? New moms, they're not sleeping so great. And then nurses. Let's just focus on the new moms. When a new mom can't sleep and she sits down at a computer to search for help, is she asking for blackout curtains, light bulbs, and other products to help her sleep? No. She is saying, help me put my child to bed. Help me make my child sleep through the night, right? So as a startup, you have a small marketing budget. You don't want to convince the mom that she should be looking for a light bulb, right? You want to talk to the people that are already looking for those products that you offer. And so that's how you kind of figure out who your early adopter, your beachhead market is like who's actually looking for what you're trying to offer, right? And so Greg focused on the quantified self community. And as he got more customers and he increased his revenue and expanded his team and he had more resources over the next 2 years, then he started creating content for new moms. Can't do it all at once. You have to prime the pump with just one segment.
That's a great story, Lindsay. Like, no, that tells us like a methodological approach solves the problem that even an entrepreneur is trying to solve. Like trying to find out those right customers who are already looking for solutions. Sometimes it's very hard to kind of create that kind of specific segment that we need to go after as an entrepreneur. That first segment that are actually looking for solutions. Now that
it's scary for a lot of people to niche down that small, and it was scary to me to start to focus 4 years ago on mostly non-technical founders. That wasn't an easy thing for me, but you're going to make your life so much easier if you do, right? Because then you know who you're talking to, you know which feedback to listen to. There's nothing worse than like getting feedback from like so many different types of customers with so many different use cases that you don't know how to make them all happy.
That's just awesome. Now that people who are doing customer discovery research and identifying these pain points, and now that they have these potential customers, the next ideal step is building their prototype or an MVP, right? Distill for our audience what a prototype versus an MVP is and how should they go about building this?
So prototype and MVP is a Venn diagram, right? That like they can be used to talk about the same thing. But they also have mutually exclusive reference points. So as I said before, a minimal viable product is the smallest amount of features that demonstrate your unique value proposition, solve the customer's problem in the cheapest way possible. So I personally look at an MVP as not a full product. If you tell me that login and account pages are part of the MVP, that's not true. The MVP should really just demonstrate that people like the approach you're taking to solve their problem, and preferably you actually solve that problem using the MVP. Okay. Now, that MVP could be coded, but it also could be a string of no-code tools for existing technologies out there, right? A Google form that triggers a Zap, that triggers an email, and somehow that solves the problem, right? So that's an MVP because it's smallest amount of features, it's super cheap, and people can walk through it and see that it works, and get some value. A prototype, you could call that a prototype, right? You could call that a prototype. But sometimes a prototype doesn't deliver any value. It just mimics what the software will do. Okay? So what you might have is a clickable prototype, and that's just wireframes, right? Stenciled out views of different pages of your app, and people can click through it, and you can at least test the usability of it. You can test whether people know what to do on each page and understand the instructions. So I know doesn't make it that much clearer, but in the English language, we use so many different words to talk about the same thing. And Silicon Valley terminology is no different. So a prototype can not necessarily deliver value. An MVP has to deliver value.
Thanks for sharing that difference, Lindsay. And now my next question is, you talk about selling even before building, right? So that's one thing. It's a challenge for a lot of entrepreneurs who are just getting started. So help us understand, how can entrepreneurs sell their ideas even before building anything?
Yeah, I'll give you I'll give you a few examples. Okay, so you know how one of the things a lot of startups, like the advice out there is like, build a landing page with some value propositions and create like a launch list of people following you ready when you launch. Most people just like put up a landing page and don't give anything in return. They just describe what the product is. And that doesn't work. Like, they put that up and then it never works. And they don't have that many people waiting for their product. But if you understand the customer problem that you are solving, you should be somewhat of a thought leader on it. Like, you should have general advice for how your customers should solve that problem. I mean, your product is a manifestation of your advice, but your words, your blog posts, your ebooks, right, your tweets, your Instagram posts, those should all be manifestations of the advice that you would give to your customer too, and a discussion of the types of things they should be doing if they would like to address that problem. So rather than say, hey, sign up for my launch list and I'll tell you when the product is here, say, hey, I wrote this ebook that has some templates that you can use immediately to solve your problem right now. And while you use that, I will also tell you about this product that I'm building, right? So you need to sell your unique perspective as well. So when I say that, I mean, like, there's some initial first offer that you can put out there. If it's just an ebook, if it's just some articles that capture your understanding of the problem, whatever it is, like, you should know what your customers' big lifetime goals are, and say they want to get to that goal in 5 years. What do they have to achieve this year? If they need to get to that goal this year, what do they have to do this month? What do they have to do this week? What do they have to do today? So, like, offer them something and see if they engage with that. Do they believe in that? Do they follow you? Right? Don't talk about your product, talk about them and their problems and their goals and how you can help them, and see if they engage with you. Because you're going to need to do that work when you have a product. So you might as well start while you're developing the product in the background. Okay? So I do not mean go create a huge audience first, then build a product. I mean doing these two in tandem. Because one of the things I say in my product market fit workshop is awareness takes time. It takes a long time for people to buy you and buy the product, right? They don't buy the second they hear about you. I know this. I have entrepreneurs that have been on my list for 2-3 years before they join labs, right? 10 months before they join labs, 6 months before they join labs, okay? So they don't buy the second they hear about you. It takes time to build trust and awareness and for them to believe in you and engage with your business. So you might as well start building that awareness at the same time that you're building your product, and do it in tandem. That is another big mistake most entrepreneurs make. They look at these as consecutive things rather than tandem, okay? The other thing is that if you can solve your customer's problem, they don't really care if it's an app or a desktop website or some other piece of technology. They just care that you solved the problem in a way that they enjoy. So the next example is a past client of mine, Christina Weber, who has a community called Deepen. Now, she had this idea of building a community of authentic people building intimate and authentic relationships. So really for singles to meet other singles, but build relationships over time versus like through some speed dating. And so she had this idea of ClassPass for these events. Now, Christina already had 3,000 founders and she was hosting one event per quarter, really high touch, expensive events. But in order to go to a ClassPass model, she needed to prove that her audience would go to events that other people hosted, right? Because ClassPass is a lot of different fitness studios, okay? So Christina could have said, I need to build my whole ClassPass platform, but not all of us had the type of money that the ClassPass founder had. I forget her name right now, but she had a lot of money to build ClassPass software first and then fail and flail for a few years before it clicked. So Christina had her audience. She just needed a Squarespace site and Eventbrite and MailChimp and needed to go out and find other hosts that wanted to cater to her audience and decide how much they were going to share revenue-wise if she were to promote their event to her audience. Okay? So that is a prototype of ClassPass for dating events, but she just used existing tools out there and she made money.
That solves the problem that she's trying to solve in that simple manner without having to build a whole platform in order to engage their users. That's just awesome. You see entrepreneurs who might have failed several times, but they have invested a lot of time and energy and money in order to build the platforms. And then we have seen entrepreneurs who have these great ideas, very simple ideas, seems very simple, but they have done the research and their background and built those small prototypes and gained so many insights and then went on to build their platforms that eventually scaled.
Yeah, like Christina figured out over the following year while making money what types of hosts she liked working with and didn't like working with, what type of revenue sharing models worked. She would have had to figure those out eventually. Why not figure those out before you sink money into a platform, right? Because you can spend $25,000, $50,000 building the platform, and then you're going to need another year to figure out all those things before you start really making any of that money back. So I would rather figure out a lot of stuff and not be out 25 or 50 grand and then be confident when I put that money in that I know exactly how it's supposed to work. And so I just want to say one thing that came to mind, which is that an MVP, an early prototype, the art of it is the minimum features. It's more about what not to build than what to build. And that is a lean startup concept that gets lost when we talk about the MVP. It is the minimum features and what not to build.
That's a great advisor, Lindsay, because minimum viable product can be can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different people. But I think thanks for clarifying that very clearly for people who are listening, so that they don't repeat the same mistakes that a lot of people commonly do every single time. And even entrepreneurs who have built products for several times still make the same common mistakes again and again. And I think just clarifying that very clearly to our audience is going to help a lot of our listeners. Thanks for that. So what advice do you give to people who are just thinking about being entrepreneurs? They might not even have the ideas, but they are listening to this podcast or just listening to our video here on our YouTube channel. Tell them, what would you tell them to be able to think and create that entrepreneurial mindset very early on, even before they have an idea?
Yeah. So there's a few things that are popping into my mind right now. So one is I hear a lot of people look at labs, which is my product market fit for pre-seed startups program, and they feel like they're not ready for it. And what I tell them is that all you need is a customer, a type of person that you really want to help. So if you're volunteering a lot, you're reading to elementary school kids, take that passion of reading to elementary school kids and just start with them. Okay? Because if you want to find products for your customers, you don't want to find customers for a product you already have. So if you can identify an audience that you are passionate about and you want to make their lives better, that's where you need to start.
That's a great advice, Lindsay.
The other thing I wanted to say is where there are problems, there are opportunities. So one of the activities that I put in the first week of labs is to go sit and observe a queue at a coffee shop. Okay, now it's COVID. Maybe you want to sit and drive up to the parking lot of a Dunkin' Donuts and watch the queue for 30 minutes. Just watch the queue and tell me what is the average kind of drive through the queue, and then what mistakes did you see? What was unusual, right? Something happens where it doesn't work the way it's intended. So if you can sit and observe and identify a few problems, that's all it takes to start. Where there are problems, there's opportunities. So just like we know, we all stand at, getting on a plane, and we all are like, how did they figure out this boarding methodology? It doesn't make sense. And some of you are thinking better ways to do it. That it's the same muscle that you exercise. So instead of like getting involved in the queue, sit back and watch what happens for 30 minutes. And where there are problems, there are opportunities.
Absolutely. I think you shared a couple of great insights there. You mentioned about even before having ideas, what kind of customers that they wanted to serve. You almost mentioned about things like, hey, just look at things that you love doing the most and the kind of the person that you wanted to help the most. I think that's just a great insight, because a lot of people who wanted to become entrepreneurs might be wondering, hey, I don't have ideas, I don't know where to get started. But I think just getting to know themselves a little bit more and just looking outside who they hang out most and what are the kind of people that they spend most of their time with. I mean, you mentioned about a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
I will say this. A lot of new founders don't want to start until they have an idea that they think will make money. But if you are starting with only the desire to make money, don't do it. Because it takes a long time for your investment to pay off. So you have to be passionate about the audience you're helping. Otherwise, when you don't get rich quick, you're going to be disappointed, and disappointment leads to burnout and depression, and that's a lot of suffering in the entrepreneurial world because of that. So you have to start with a problem that you really want to go away, or an audience that you really want to help and empower.
Wow. I mean, that's again a great advice. Just to identify problems that they are super passionate about and serving people that they are already hanging out with. And now, just going to my next question, talk about a little bit more about the labs and the whole program that you're helping your entrepreneurs with.
Yeah. So labs started 4 years ago based on the statements that I made early in our conversation, which in the chasm of going from what customers say to what engineers build, there are a ton of skill sets that have nothing to do with software development. So labs was built on what are all those skill sets and how can I stack them in a way that helps you build your business. Okay. So it's called labs. It's product market fit for pre-seed startups. most product market fit definitions out there treat product market fit as an inflection point that you can think about later, but you cannot wait to think about your customers. You have to figure that stuff out first. Okay. So I've also developed my own 7 benchmarks for product market fit that start from the very beginning with founder problem fit. Like, why you? Why your team? What skills do you have? What context do you have? Why this problem? Are you passionate about it? One of the top 10 reasons, or maybe top 3 reasons startups fail. The third one is like not the right team. And I believe that's just because it's a team of people that aren't passionate enough about the problem. So you start there. So Labs moves you through the first 3 of the 4 benchmarks. Okay. And that's the crucial piece of going from having some idea to having some offer or prototype that you can now iterate on, and doing that in a lean way and doing all the research correctly to figure that out. So it is a 12-week program, micro video learning lessons delivered on a weekly basis. And it's all of these skills, like I said, stacked in a way that they build on top of each other. They get the information you need to build your startup, to galvanize an audience, to know what your first prototype and your first offer is so that you can start iterating from there. And there's 2 types of founders that take Labs. Both are desiring to connect with customers. They have not been able to, and so that's why they come to Labs. One is someone starting from scratch. They've been sitting on some idea. They could have spent months or years doing like market research, reading industry reports, maybe talk to a few people, but they're still really confused about where to start and how this whole thing manifests. And then there's the person that has a product, has invested money, is not getting the type of traction that they want or desire. They know they need to go back to connecting with customers to figure out what that delta is so that they can move forward. So those are the 2 types of people that come to Labs. And like I said, because I stack these skills, people walk out and are like, oh, I know how to do product iterations going forward. Like, I know how to ask the right questions and connect with customers and bring customers along the way as we iterate on our product. So you walk away not just having achieved these milestones, these first 3 benchmarks of product market fit, but you also walk away with skills that enable you to keep going and iterating in that lean, agile way.
That's a great program. So definitely please check out Lindsay's program, because if you are an entrepreneur or just getting started and have an idea, or even before having an idea, as Lindsay has mentioned, definitely look up for her programming and also check out her YouTube channel. So maybe Lindsay, if you wanted to share where people can find you or contact you or reach out to you, I think that would be helpful.
Yes. So specifically for information about Labs, it's lindsayt.com/labs. So it's Lindsay with an A, T like in Tom.com/labs, LAB like in boy, S. So that's Labs. On YouTube, I'm under Lindsay Tabas, Lady Engineer. If you search Lindsay Lady Engineer on Google, I will be the first person to come up. If you go to my website, lindsayt.com, you can sign up for the Labs waitlist, so you can hear when we open doors again, which will probably be in September or October. You can also download my ebook where I talk about product market fit and the 3 myths that we need to all stop believing in order to really be innovators. And I also, for some of you that are farther along, I have a fundraising quiz. So one thing I left out is that entrepreneurs are my focus, but in the background, I do perform due diligence on behalf of investors, angel and venture capital. So I developed this 23-point checklist. It's called the Are You Investable Fundraising Quiz. So you can run through it, and I put you in 3 groups and give you some advice based on how many things you say yes and no to.
That's awesome, Lindsay. Thank you once again for coming onto the show and sharing great insights about finding product market fit, talking to customers, and identifying your early adopters. These are
Yeah.
some great insights every entrepreneur look up to when they're just getting started. Do you have any final words to share with our audience?
My dad always said, in order to be outstanding, you have to be willing to stand out. That's my final advice. So push yourself, because beautiful things happen when you're just a little bit scared and uncomfortable.
That's awesome. Thank you once again for coming onto the show. It's been a pleasure
Thank
talking to
you.
you today.
Thanks so much for having me.